Hello and welcome to the Last Mixtape Podcast. My name is Stephen White, and on this week's show, we review Bon Iver's brand new EP, Sable, and the latest music from the week that was. But first, the job of the artist is always to deepen the mystery. The words of Francis Bacon. Why, Stephen, I can hear you asking through the screen and through your podcast listening device, are you quoting a 20th century Irish artist known for his surrealist, abstract, contorted paintings? Well, dear listener, and indeed, dear viewer, this week we are going to be reviewing Bon Iver and his new EP, 3-track, EP, Sable. Now, the reason why I bring up the mystery of the artist, because for me, the artist as a mystery is something that I quite enjoy. An artist that is kind of abstract from view, abstract from us as a listener. And I think Bon Iver, Justin Vernon, and I know a lot of people will say, well, Bon Iver is it's a group of musicians and all that kind of stuff. I'm terribly sorry. It's Justin Vernon. I'm really sorry about that, but to me, it's Justin Vernon. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and like the idea of the mystery of the artist as somebody who can change shape, change sound, and change kind of who they are and what they are seen as, and probably obscure who they are seen as to the listener and to the audience itself. I think it all kind of kicks off to me with Justin Vernon. It always comes across to me as quite an introverted artist. And in this new EP, 4-track EP, 3-track EP, Sable, I think that's kind of shown really to the forefront. And in order to kind of get to Sable, we need to start at the beginning of when we begin to know Bon Iver himself, which is with his debut album, For Emma, Forever Ago. And I remember when this record came out, and we talked a couple of months back in relation to Taylor Swift on the allure of lore, the kind of us as an audience, us as kind of consumers of art and as listeners wanting to find that authentic something behind the music, find the meaning, find the story behind the story behind the art. I think we're always searching for that, no matter where and in what concept we are in or what medium of art we are in. With For Emma, Forever Ago, which is an absolutely beautiful album, it did coincide with a story. It coincided with the idea of Justin Vernon going off into a woods in America, in a cabin in the woods kind of idea, and working on an album as he worked on his heartbreak. And this raw externalization of hurt and heartbreak and emotion was felt throughout that record. And I think it is a beautiful, beautiful record, and it's probably around about one of my favourite of his, of Bon Iver's. That the reason, like that story behind it added somehow to the music, and it added to the mystery of Bon Iver, of Justin Vernon. I remember seeing him on Jules Holland performing Skinny Love. And it was just a gorgeous, and I say again, like that kind of outward expression of hurt, and the performance was very much that, and the kind of the world that followed with him and the intrigue that followed with him. And now a number of artists would then kind of try to follow that, go into the woods and dream it all up again, which is a beautiful thing. I mean, it's nothing new. We can all say, you look at something like maybe Neil Young, when he went off and made Harvest, he was moving away from the Laurel Canyon kind of idea, things going away and dreaming it up again. And that's something a lot of artists have done, going away to find authenticity, going away to find themselves, and going away to work on perhaps a hurt or an emotion or a feeling that's deep down inside. And I think with For Emma, Forever Ago, that was very clear. But that mystery of, and that kind of mystique and lore around Justin Vernon and Bon Iver did really follow him throughout his whole career. The second album, the self-titled record, which I would say to me is probably my favourite of his works, is far more widescreen in its composition. And again, it had that DIY feel to it, but not in the kind of feral, raw way For Emma, Forever Ago did. It was far more constructed, far more musically sophisticated. But there were kind of 80s synths in there. There was moments of kind of Richard Marx-esque. I think it's Beth and Rest is the song where it's kind of like a Richard Marx song. And it's beautiful. Again, but it has that kind of DIY feel of choosing these synthesizers and choosing these things that wouldn't make any sense. The album would earn Justin Vernon a Grammy. And around that Grammy win, there was a lot of kind of like, well, who's this guy? Like, if you weren't already a fan, there was a lot of kind of like, well, who's this guy who's just walked up on stage and won an award? And I think that more than Forever Forever Ago, which got him the critical acclaim and most certainly put him on the map, the second album with Holocene and songs like that really thrust him forward. And it was interesting to see that there was almost a kind of a discomfort to that attention. There was all kind of almost a shirking of it, almost like not an unraveling of the mystery, but Justin Vernon, the artist, was far more in the fore than he had been with Forever Forever Ago. And that album is beautiful in its construct as well, and the use of brass and the performance side of it, like the much more rhythm, and you can feel the musicians, aside from Justin Vernon, really coming to the fore in that. And if you saw the live performances around that, that was certainly the case. But again, almost in that kind of mystique and kind of pulling away slightly, not pulling away from the audience, because his music was quite still very raw and very emotional. Holocene's a beautiful example of that. But there was a kind of a hiding oneself within the band, a hiding oneself within the music. And that's a beautiful album. And as I say, it's most certainly my favourite of his works. Moving on to the third album, moving on to 22 A Million. We, once again, a Grammy winner, and he's still in that space. And in between those two records, he'd released an album with the Volcano Choir, kind of a post-rock, indie folk kind of take on his sound, and they're very much part of a band. And it's interesting that he once again kind of reverted into that and pushed aside the kind of Bon Iver, and I think he was a bit coy at the time whether or not he'd return to that moniker, that pseudonym, the kind of the writer's name kind of type thing. And he released this record, and I did really enjoy that song, particularly Bygone from that record was beautiful. But it felt almost, although part of a band, very much like a kind of a leveling of the Bon Iver sound, that it kind of been almost like honed very much on that record, on the Volcano Choir. Moving on to 22 A Million, the Grammy winner as well, and he's once again, the attention is there, but far more abstract, far more experimental. The songs are kind of cut and hidden, and there's kind of a cubist feel to it. There's a shapes to it. There's that kind of removement from the fore of it. He's exploring who he is as a songwriter. He's exploring who Bon Iver is. And again, that kind of abstraction and that draw away is kind of seen there, because I remember seeing him in around that time at Forbidden Fruit in Dublin and Kilmainham, and if you were at that show, you will remember it was quite kind of pulled back by a lot of technical issues. It was a deluge of rain that entire weekend at the festival, unfortunately, Ireland as it is. But around that time he was performing, he was very much hidden. He's very much up the front, but almost hidden amongst a wall of kind of synthesizers and drum bits and all of this kind of stuff. And he'd kind of removed himself, and the music was great. The music was abstract. The music was vivid. He was moving and changing who he was as an artist. And he had that space, although the success was there and the kind of the thrust into a sort of limelight, and not obviously as big as other artists, but a kind of a reckoning, as it were, with that kind of limelight and Grammy Awards and critical acclaim. He was still able to move and shape who he was. He did feel very much one step ahead and one step ahead of himself. And that album is a testament to him, because that kind of experimentation would be copied by others and followed by others, but very much perfected by him and used by others as well in that kind of way. He would move on then, make his most recent album, which was I, which I felt was kind of like the end of the line almost. It was kind of the meeting of the second self-titled record and 22 Million, a little bit of Volcano Choir. It's so far away from the raw, kind of spacious feel of the debut album Forever Forever Ago. We're a long way from shore, if that's the right analogy there. And once again, the kind of even the artwork, even the portraits of Bon Iver became more abstract as well. There was a kind of a hidden nature to it, a kind of an auteurness in which he was kind of directing the work and being a part of the work, but very much being within it with I, which was again a melding of those sounds, and a very good record too. Hey Ma was, I believe, also won a Grammy for him, and it was a very beautiful song. And he'd, in between that and where we get to now with Sable, and we are getting to the EP, there was a kind of a more kind of movement into kind of almost political songwriting, and a comfort with who he was as a person, and maybe a comfort with the level of respect and a comfort with the level of attention he was getting. So that brings us to now, to Sable, and that whole journey that we've been on. And I think this is very interesting in its intimacy, in how much it has removed from previous records, in how much of the affectations of Bon Iver have been gathering up since Forever Forever Ago. Now, I don't want to say it's a return to that. I don't think it is. There are still textures and moments of his work up to now and the things and influences that he has taken in the meantime that meld themselves into the work. But in terms of more intimacy, in terms of it being perhaps not a return but a removal of elements, is very interesting. And the introversion of the record as well, and the idea of an artist as an introvert was always something that's interested me. As a fellow introvert, and I know I'm saying that as I direct my podcast to a camera, but it's the idea and the clashing of those two elements of being an introvert but wanting to create, wanting to express. I think my little kind of like a theory on this, if you follow me down the rabbit hole, and if we move a little bit away, and perhaps still slightly in the Bon Iver review, the idea of, I think it's in introverts to want to express through art. Now, there are a lot of extroverted artists, look, Mick Jagger, people like that, David Bowie, all that kind of stuff. That helps for sure. But I think it's very interesting, the pathway of the introvert to artist to expression. The wanting to express and wanting to find a language, wanting to find a way of doing it. If your language is film, if your language is photography, if your language is music, if your language is dance, if your language is writing, moving it away from maybe conversation into something where you could feel safe expressing. And that thing that is inside you that you find hard to express through speech, you can express through art. And I think that's something of that is in Sable, the EP, and in Bon Iver, the artist. That idea of that very introverted album, hiding himself away in the world from the world with Forever Ago, and then slowly over time being a Grammy winner and all of this attention and very much being on the forefront of his particular genre. There's something about going back to or removing some of those elements and having a kind of an introverted EP, which this is. Things Behind Things is the first song. There's an ellipses at the beginning of the record. And it's very interesting is all of these songs on Spotify have video accompaniment of some sort. But there's a kind of ellipses textural thing, and then into Things Behind Things, which is incredibly introspective and almost incredibly direct lyrically. There's not a lot of symbolism or metaphor. It is very much an honest speaking of oneself, almost a conversation to oneself that Bon Iver is having as an artist. And it is direct, it is raw. As I say, it is a kind of a removal to it, and it has elements more of the sophomore album, the quieter tracks on the self-titled second album of his. And it has those inflections, but the raw directness and maybe a conversation with oneself and a conversation of where he has been in these last couple of years and where he has been since the beginning is incredibly interesting. And it's incredibly interesting to see an artist come back with that, especially since, as I say, the last two albums, I and 22 A Million, were more abstracting. And it's an interesting shift. And I, as I say, I don't want to say return to form or anything like that. I think it's more a removal. Space Side? Spy Side. The second song is something I don't know how to pronounce, but that's very interesting itself. It is a kind of a country track. There's a kind of a country feel to this, and I think this is the first track that he unveiled from it. And it did feel very much like, this is almost like an alt country song made in the kind of ilk of Bon Iver, and again more into the second album kind of feel. But the chord choices, the choice of chords that he plays in that record and in that song are more aligned with the debut and Forever Ago. There's a beauty to the chord choices, and there's a smallness to the song. And again, it's that kind of, I don't want to say lonesome nature of it, but feeling of loneliness, the feeling of wanting to express, and maybe the idea that whilst the abstractions and the experimentation are an expression of an artist in his respect, that there was something about going back to being are going to being more direct, that allowed him to express things a little clearer and a little more. And that was maybe what he was going for. It finishes then, interestingly, I think, with Awards Season, which is the final track on the EP. And that was what really brought me into the idea of perhaps this is a person or an artist reckoning with what it was expected of them, where they were. Like, you know, we've talked before on I believe on, you know, whether or not awards are things. And look, it's great to win an award. It would be always great to win an award. If we all won awards every day, we'd be like, absolutely, give me awards. But what does it mean as an artist? What does it mean to you? Does it change you? Does it change anything about you? And I think that's what this is about. How do you define yourself when you've been defined by others? You know, we talk about music here, and as I said in the past, I was very much of a review kind of critic idea. Now I kind of like to delve into records in a different way. But that kind of award kind of idea, or that kind of pat on the back type thing, must change an artist in some ways. I don't think it can't. And I think it's very interesting that this song as well on the record has those brass choices. It has kind of those brass stabs, very much reminiscent of the first time they appear again on the second album, which was the Grammy winner. And I think that is quite interesting, and a quite interesting choice. I think Sable as an EP is an interesting study in introversion and expression. A wanting to return, or maybe a wanting to remove some of the things that abstracted an artist's work and that were advantageous for abstraction, but now in the want to communicate and the want to express are not needed. So there's a removal and a finding down and a honing down and a digging down into the songs themselves. And who knows what it means for Bon Iver in the long run. Often I think EPs like this don't allude to what the next record are. I think often they are maybe a kind of a removal of those elements of kind of like getting it out of the way, but taking it to one side and moving on and being able to move on an artist and giving those songs a home outside, needing to make an album about those things. I really enjoyed it as a Bon Iver fan, as a Justin Vernon fan. I really enjoyed it as a little soupçon of his work, and I loved delving into just having those songs from him that are a little clearer. Whilst I liked the 22 Million and I liked having that kind of clearer connection, because that was where, as a fan, I began with on Forever Ago, which is that more emotive stripping back of all the elements. As it were, to the introvert as the expressionist artist, I think that's always going to be something that fascinates me. And I think it fascinates all of us, the idea of wanting to express, and why maybe a quiet, more shy, more reserved person would do something as kind of outwardly expressionist as creating art and creating music and putting yourself in the kind of the industry, as it were. And I think from Forever Ago to Sable is a very interesting study in that case. Would I recommend it to you? Absolutely. If you're a fan of Bon Iver, this is going to be some more of that you love, and maybe a return, if you want, to the earlier stuff. And even if you're a fan of the kind of the later stuff, I think there's elements of that in it as well. But Bon Iver, Sable the EP, it's out now, and check it out. Yes, they seek him here, they seek him there, those musos seek him everywhere. Is he in heaven or is he at the disco? That damned elusive Count of Monte playlist. Oh, yes, dear listener, the style and profile and limousine riding jet flying playlist making son of a gun has once again returned to the shores of Playlistia to bring you another beautiful bounty in the form of TLMT's Irish mixtape on Spotify. New Irish music. Shall we begin? I think we shall. This week with Morgana, and Morgana's brand new and debut solo single, I'll Cry When I'm Dead. Absolutely loved this track, and I was very interested to see what Morgana would come up with on a solo record, on her own, out on her own with a new track. And it is very, very interesting in the textures and the motifs and the music that it uses. Morgana's vocal is powerful and it is very much in the center, but it is affected. There's a lot of kind of like synthwave movements going through it. There's kind of ending abstraction towards the end. The song really kind of flows and runs a gamut. And what is very interesting in it is that it has that kind of pop motif to it, that electro pop feel to it. There's a danceability to it, but there is an energy behind the lyrics and there's an energy behind the performance that alludes to something more, that alludes to more kind of slightly more introverted, darker edges towards it, that really pulls you in and pulls you forward. And when it comes to that ending abstraction, as I said, kind of where the music starts to almost turn and twist itself and contort itself, you can feel the payoff of that undercurrent that runs beneath it. Morgana, as a solo performer and as a vocalist and as a songer, really comes to the fore on this incredibly striking debut and kind of like Susan, if you will, kind of like, the first strike, if you want, and from her. And yeah, it is absolutely fantastic and so great to see, because the great work that she's done as one half of Saint's sister, and you can feel still that vocally that element is in there. But I'll Cry When I'm Dead as a solo single, and then the first kind of shot across the bows, or really works from her. And I would recommend that you check it out. It's on the playlist, but as always, you can go and find Morgana's music wherever you want to listen to it, however you want to listen to it. I believe there are shows coming up and things like that. But if the Count of Monte playlist did such things, he would tell you when they are, but I actually can't remember. So I'm going to move on to the next track, which is Vernon Jane and their brand new single, Getting Better, or Get Better, which is a brooding, spacious, reverb-soaked song. And it's a very interesting return from Vernon Jane in just how angular this song is, and almost the indie inflections of it. There's a directness to this song, and quite like the Morgana song, actually. It comes to a head in a kind of cacophonous, abstracted ending as well, where musically the elements that are bubbling in the background come into the foreground, as it were, and play into something that is quite interesting and quite deep. But the angular, raw, almost brutalist edge of the beginning of the song, or the intro of the song, really captures the power of Vernon Jane vocalist Emily and songwriter Emily as a commanding presence within the song that commands the center when we get to that kind of abstracted end where her own voice is part of kind of her harmonies and drums and all these kind of things come into it. So it's interesting to see that more angular, direct approach from Vernon Jane on Get Better, which is their new single. It is on the playlist. It has been chosen. Check it out on TLMT's Irish Mixtape on Spotify. Next up, we have a cut from Houseplant's brand new album, Half Known Things. The name of the track is Swimming Pool. And yeah, these guys coming back with that kind of idiosyncratic electro-pop sound, very much kind of the lyrical mangling, Paul Noonan and Dahi, and kind of melding those two elements and those two personalities, musical personalities together to create something that, yeah, it has this kind of world of rhythm behind it. And it's interesting in kind of the almost the clipped rhythm and the phrasing, which is the most interesting part, I suppose, of it, of Noonan's vocal performance. It's the phrasing of the lyrics and how they are phrased around the rhythms that Dahi builds around them and the production builds around. And it's very interesting in its choices, because when you have songs that are so alive with rhythm, fitting a melody, fitting a vocal into them can be quite hard, because you have to find space. And I think as an act, as a duo, Paul Noonan and Dahi have created that really good symbiosis between the music and the beats and the lyrics and the performance of them, and how they are delivered, how they are phrased, how they are put into the music. And yeah, it's a great song from a really cool album. Half Known Things is the album. Swimming Pool is the name of the track. Check out both, if you will, if you think you like this work before. I would say definitely check it out. If you're a fan of like LCD Sound System, Talking Heads, stuff like that, that is very much in that milieu. And yeah, you can definitely check it out if you like it. It's on the playlist, and the album itself is where you want to listen to albums, how you want to listen to albums. Check out Houseplants and all their cool stuff as well, and you can listen to them wherever you want to listen to them. I am not the boss of you. I am merely the Count of Monte Playlisto. Very much different from being your boss. Next up, though, we have Shiv with a cut from her album. The Defiance of a Sad Girl is the name of the album. The name of the track is Truth Be Truthing, featuring Kadiata. And I think it's really interesting album as well. And I think the album, interestingly as well, is kind of like a series of slinky, stylized R&B vignettes. A very much the kind of like episodic feel to the record. A lot of the songs, not all, but a lot of songs are quite short and clipped, especially towards the start. And, you get into these songs that are very much, as I say, vignettes, almost like entries in a diary almost. A kind of a portrait of Shiv the artist through this album, as it were, Defiance of a Sad Girl. And on Truth Be Truthing, it really plays into that with these kind of small moments, the back and forth, and the kind of groove of the feel of the record. It really, in terms of production and presentation, songwriting, and Shiv as a performer, it really hits those marks, those genre expectations, and creates something that is intimate and feels very like at home and of the artist, from the artist, which is something we love here on the last mixtape. And big fan of Truth. The album is The Defiance of a Sad Girl, and the track on the playlist is Truth Be Truthing. Check both of them out if you want to check them out. Moving on next to Shopsy and brand new single Champagne or Champagan. I've been calling it Champagan. Again, fans of Shopsy here. Big voice, big kind of croonerism to how he performs within the kind of retro 80s glisten and sheen of the songwriting and indeed the production. And it's all about that. It has the fun of it. It has the very big giveaway choruses that really suit Shopsy's voice, the presentation as well of a big performer with a big voice, big sound. It's all kind of coming together, and it really captures it on the record, which is the important thing, which is capturing the character and the sound and the performance on record, on the kind of tape, as it were. And I think this is a very, very cool track, Champagne, from Shopsy. As I say, it plays into a contemporary take on the 80s aesthetic, and I think he does that really well. As I say, it suits the voice, it suits the kind of big sound with a big voice, and I think it's really cool. Check it out, Shopsy, Champagne. It is on the playlist. Check it out. And finally, moving on to Proper Micro NV, also from an album this week. Lots of albums coming out, and the album is Microsaurus. Track taken from is Never Go On, coming towards the end of the record here, and it's an entangled electronic passages and movements that feel quite intimate by the vocal and how it is performed, and there's kind of a moodiness portrayed within the kind of longer electronic pieces that meld and stitch together to make this album. It is very much one that feels like it is a part of different things. It has that kind of abstract feel to it of kind of different parts laid on top of each other. And I think Never Go On kind of has that moodiness, has that broodingness, and as great ending songs to albums go, it really captures a mood of the journey that you've been on. And I think very interesting artist by Proper Micro NV, as somebody who kind of takes different sounds, takes their own sound, puts it in, and creates something very interesting and far-reaching as well. And it's from the album Microsaurus. Track is Never Go On, and it rounds up the Count's playlist picks this week. But never fear, the Count of Monty Playlisto shall be back. But in the meantime, check out the Irish Mixtapes Spotify playlist by TLMT on Spotify. Check out all of these cool artists, however, whenever you want, and however you want, and all those deadly things and stuff like that. But for now, that is it from the Count of Monty Playlisto. Till next week, when I shall return. And so it goes, and there it went. But before I go, thank you for listening and viewing the Last Mixtape podcast here on Spotify, Apple, and indeed on YouTube. If you could like, subscribe, and comment to help the podcast grow, I would be forever grateful. You could also contact me via stephen@thelastmixtape.com with all of your songs for the Count of Monty Playlisto, who I will hand them over to, because I cannot be clearer about this. I am not the Count of Monty Playlisto. That's a different guy that you just saw. I'm a completely different character. So if you want to send on songs for him, you can send them through me via stephen@thelastmixtape.com. But for now, that was the Last Mixtape podcast. You were the listener and the viewer. I was Stephen White. Hey, so long.